Good day, ladies and gents. Sorry we missed you last week. We were working on something in the kitchen, and it's pretty exciting. You'll find out soon enough. It's Ariel, in case you forgot about me. It's been a while since my last presentation, but tonight I'm here with yours truly, Maggie and Drew, and a special guest too. You might hear him in the background a little bit. So grab your tea, grab your crumpets. We're going all the way across the globe to England. But not just current England. That's right, Victorian age England. Tonight we'll be deep diving into the wacky tobacco case of Amelia Dyer. She is responsible for the deaths of up to 400 possible children. This makes her one of the most abundant serial killers of all time. How will what seems to be a harmless newspaper ad change the outcome of so many fates? I'm glad you asked. Let's get into it. And as always, don't forget to like us on all social media platforms and send in some case suggestions to contact us at cheeseforthoughtpodcast.com. I'm Ariel.
I'm Maggie.
And I'm Drew.
And you're listening to Cheese for Thought Podcast. Tune in next week for our part 2 on the shoe fetish slayer. Amelia Elizabeth Hobley was born in 1837. She was the youngest of 5. Her family lived in the Pyle Marsh. Pyle Marsh is very close to Bristol, for context, which is in England. That's right, folks, we're going to Europe for tonight's show. Amelia was born to her father, Samuel Hobley, who was a talented shoemaker, and her mother, Sarah. Her older siblings were named Thomas, James, William, and Sarah Ann. They had a very luxurious lifestyle for the time in the Victorian era. They all had an education, which was especially rare for the women. They had tons of books freely available to them, and they could all read and write. When Amelia was born, she was also taught to read and write at a very young age. They were one of the only common families who could read and write versus the elite upper-class families, like doctors, scientists, etc.
Wow, that's actually pretty interesting because, back in the Victorian era, no one could read unless you were super rich.
That's interesting.
So, like you said, this really set the Hobley family apart from everyone else. This made them an irreplaceable part of the community. Samuel was respected as a crafter. People from all over the town would often ask the family for help writing. So let me tell you a little bit about Sarah, the mother, the OG Sarah. There was the Great Irish Famine.
Let's hear it.
Yeah. So this takes us back to the Great Irish Famine. Typhus had already spread to England, and of course, naturally, this means this family was affected by it. Sarah was part of the unwashed and unclean lower class, so she ended up getting it. There was zero treatment at the time, so this can be spread by lice, chiggers, mites, and fleas. You develop a rash, a fever, and a headache. It was very common back then, but nowadays it's actually very rare. Thank you, science. Anyways, antibiotics weren't available until the next century. So Sarah did not die, shockingly, but she did have severe brain damage. These illnesses...
That's not good.
Yeah, no. These illnesses and violent fits Sarah had was one of the first bad things to have happened to Amelia, but certainly not the last. Samuel was a great dad, but often neglected Sarah and his kids. He left the kids in her care knowing that she had mood swings and erratic behaviors. He might not have had any other options being the only one working in the household, so the kids ended up learning Sarah's quirks and were able to live around them. Amelia, being the youngest, was often left alone with her, so she witnessed the worst outbursts. In 1841, Sarah Ann died of an illness, so that was the younger sister.
That's sad.
So she had outbursts because she had brain damage?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it completely affected her personality. So, with Sarah Ann dying so young, this left all of the womanly chores to Amelia. Amelia was only 4 years old at the time, mind you. She was expected to cook, clean, run errands in town, pay all the bills.
Why, at 4?
At 4.
At 4.
At 4 years old. Alone.
How is that even legal?
Well, it's
the 1800s.
Yeah,
so.
They didn't care about anything being legal other than not stealing or Just like simple things like that.
I didn't realize like women were they in the workforce at that point?
No, they didn't.
So then how was she?
Women didn't enter the workforce until like the 1900s.
And normally the mother would have taken over, but like I said, since she was sick, it kind of all fell onto Amelia.
That's not fair.
So, like I said, let alone, she was 4 years old. Let that soak in. I didn't know my own ass from a hole in the ground at 4.
Yeah, imagine being 4 years old and they're like, all right, I need you to go get food for dinner and
you have to cook it.
And
you have to clean.
Yeah,
and
clean.
you have to pay the bill.
And it's like, I'm just trying to ride my big wheel.
That wasn't even a thing.
Well, I'm just trying to play with my hoop and stick. Like, I don't know how to do these things. What's the equivalence to Barney in the 1800s? Like, I'm just trying to watch Barney.
They didn't have that.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
It was a play instead of just on TV. It's the Barney in a play.
Yeah, like the cutout shoebox, and it's like a Muppet show or whatever, like through the.
But I didn't.
Big box.
But the thing is, Barney was a dinosaur, right? They didn't even know dinosaurs existed until like the
There's
early.
still people that don't think dinosaurs.
Are you
existed.
serious? People don't think
Yes,
dinosaurs
yes.
don't exist?
Yes. We're getting off tangent, but yes.
Wow.
I don't like them people.
So obviously, yes. So she was 4 years old, so she was expected to grow up very young, which we already know, not going to end well. Her brothers were gone sunrise to sundown, abandoning all their responsibilities whatsoever. Way to be a team player, huh?
Yeah.
Shitty brothers.
Just when you think
shouldn't it fall on them?
Well, no, because then they ended up leaving to go work. At a young age, they followed their dad's footsteps, being shoemakers.
Yeah, bring that money back home and help.
Nope. Just when you think it can't get much worse, shit hits the fan. Sarah gets pregnant again. Mind you, she's incapable of doing anything at this point. The 4-year-old's running the house.
So you're telling me the husband was like
Sexually active with her, yes.
Yeah, all right, brain damage. That's what does it for me.
It's the drool. That's what does it for me.
So, all joking aside, it is going to get a little bit rough here, talking about abuse that she got. So, just keep that in mind.
Oh, gosh.
I feel like an asshole now.
So Sarah is bedridden at this point. She's screaming for her kids to do stuff for her, and if they didn't do it fast enough, Sarah would get out of bed and begin to beat them.
Oh, okay, so she has enough strength to do that, but she
can't
contribute to the house?
Correct.
Yeah.
What a
so
piece
obviously,
of shit.
This puts the unborn baby in danger now, too. It didn't even matter which kid was ignoring her. The first kid in sight got the beating, which was usually Amelia. Being the smallest, she was the slowest.
Oh. So you
That's
didn't even do anything wrong. Your brother
Nope.
did. I'm going to beat the shit out of you, though.
Amelia was catering to her mother at hand and foot, and if she wasn't fast enough, she's receiving the punishment. Amelia never seen Sarah's mental illness for what it truly was. She always internalized this abuse and thought she deserved it for her poor behavior.
That's sad.
She was forced to clean her mom's bodily fluids when her mother was too lazy to get out of bed.
That's disgusting.
So she had to clean up her mother's poop and pee at 4 years old.
Yuck.
So she was capable of using the bathroom?
The mother, yes.
Well, she's capable of beating them up. Yeah, she's capable of getting up to go to use the bathroom.
But the thing is, too, they just said she had brain damage. It didn't say to what extent. I don't know if she was in and out of what was going on.
Episodes or something.
Like in and out of consciousness.
But still, it's like, I don't feel like getting up. I'm just going to use my brain damage and shit the bed to get away with it. And then...
I'm sure she did.
I'm just going to have my 4-year-old come clean
even
it up.
if she was like, okay, coherent at one point and then not at the next, I'm sure she did use it to her advantage.
Right.
And still wet the bed when she was coherent.
Yeah, it sure sounds like it.
I think so. She's a piece of shit. Or as we can see already.
So after she would clean up her mother's bodily fluids, she then got a hot spoon pressed to her arm if her mother's tea came too late.
What the
Not fit to be parent.
She was tortured every single day, and her mother remembered none of it.
Bullshit. I call that bullshit.
As soon as Thomas, the older brother, was of age, he joined his dad in shoemaking. The other two brothers roamed around town, never wanting to be home because of the mother. So this caused more stress on Amelia. Her little sister was born in 1845 when Amelia was 8 years old. Amelia was still in charge of cooking, cleaning, and organizing all family events. At this point, it was not because their dad didn't care about them or couldn't see the situation. I think he honestly just did not know what to do at this point.
Yeah.
So the family really didn't talk about it or bring up any of Sarah's mental health issues. They kept it within the family and didn't dare bring it out in public, in fear of their dad's business and his own mental sake.
I can... as shitty as it sounds, I can understand that because it's like I have a business, I still have to run it to maintain it and bring money in. So I can understand that, like not bring it to the public eye. But man,
And plus, too, mental health was a taboo. You didn't really
It
want to
was.
bring, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
I still feel like, well, okay, not in this current
I mean,
day
in a
and
way,
age.
it kind of is still,
Yeah.
especially for men.
For men, I will
Yeah.
agree with that. Yeah, because in the world's eyes, like a man is supposed to just have it together, regardless how struggled or how bad it's supposed to get. You're supposed to just wake up, put a smile on, go to work, bring home the money, and then like just never talk about it. I do agree with that, especially in the blue collar world. It is very like, oh no, you're just being a pussy.
Yeah. So the new baby was born, and her name was Sarah Ann again, in remembrance of the older sister. So when this,
I don't like that.
well, it gets worse. So when this Sarah Ann was born, something shifted in the household.
Sweetie.
Mom Sarah started helping Amelia with the chores and cooking. The brothers began coming home.
Wait, she started helping?
Yeah, after the new
mother?
after the new baby was born, something clicked, and she ended up helping out for a bit. Don't worry, it doesn't last. So now the brothers are starting to stay home throughout the day. Now that they felt safe and okay in the house, they went back to reading and their studies. They actually ended up starting to help out around the house too. I don't think her brothers really left her in a malicious way, but they themselves were children and couldn't deal with their mom either.
Right.
Yeah.
But we all know this bliss and peace sure ain't gonna last. 5 months after Sarah Ann Jr. was born. Do I say Junior here? I don't know. Well,
I don't know either.
I guess Junior.
Yeah, junior. That yeah.
Well, anyway, the morning was awfully quiet, so Amelia thought Sarah was asleep. So she went to go check in on Sarah Ann. Her mother was already sitting in that room. Sarah Ann was laying in her arms, clearly cold and unresponsive. Sarah was trying to nurse the baby, despite the baby already being dead.
What the fuck?
What happened to the baby? I need to know immediately.
I'll get into that.
I feel like it's the mother's fault.
Yeah, I think so too, but I want to know what she did.
She tried to twist the baby's hardened arms out of the way and force her nipple into the baby's mouth to nurse her. And she was still hushing the baby to silence it.
But it was dead.
It was already dead, yes. Amelia froze and couldn't do anything but stand there and stare in horror. Once she came to and realized what was going on, she ran to town to get her dad. He was at work. She was 9 years old.
I hope that wasn't far.
Once her and her father ran back to the house and her dad pried the dead baby from Sarah's arms, she heard her mother start screaming and crying. She began to attack the dad, trying to get the baby back from him. It is not known what caused the second Sarah Ann to pass. No exam was ever done to the body, and she was buried as quickly as possible.
Do we know what happened to the first Sarah Ann?
She died of a sickness. It was very common for kids to pass away from sickness.
Are we sure that's actually how she died of?
No, but that's what it said in the research. But she was also a little bit older, too. She wasn't a baby.
I'm still wondering if the mom did it.
I could
to
see
her,
her
too.
actually passing from illness because, like Ariel said, that was very common back then.
Especially if they were, like,
So we
filthy
have
and they
no
shared
idea
bathwater.
what happened to the second.
No.
Wasn't like the normal age of death back then like 40 something
Yeah.
or yeah.
It was
Yeah.
younger, significantly younger.
So no exam was done. She was buried as quickly as possible. Sarah was back to her insane self. The death of Sarah Ann caused all her progress to deteriorate. So everything fell back onto Amelia. Shopping, cooking, cleaning, bills, and now taking care of her mother every single day. Back to Amelia. Her mother got so bad to the point she never left bed, never bathed it anymore, and she stopped talking altogether.
Well, talking all together probably was
Yeah, probably not a horrible thing at this point.
Right,
probably
right.
for the better.
Amelia was probably happy about that.
When they could get Sarah into town, all they got was horrible looks and people spreading rumors. This went on until 1848 when Sarah finally passed away. The exact circumstances behind Sarah's death are also unknown, but it is believed that Amelia did know because she was around her every second.
Right.
So, the cause of death was officially listed as complications of typhus, but obviously they didn't really know. So when her mom passed, she did get her dad's permission to leave the town and pursue an apprenticeship in Bristol making corsets. She was going to stay with her aunt who lived in the city. Her relationship with women was clearly shaped by her own experiences that she had with her mother. She was very submissive, but she might have come off as manipulative since she always said what the other person wanted to hear. She was afraid to speak out.
As she should be.
Amelia was not afraid to speak the truth and say whatever she had to get whatever it was that she needed or wanted at the time. Everyone hoped that she inherited her father's talent gene, but it became apparent she did not get his craftsmanship. Her father excelled because he was a perfectionist, whereas Amelia was very lazy. And as she should as an adult, she did so much as a kid.
Right, she's wore out. She needs a break.
She took every chance to slack off that she could. She also was quick to cut corners and not put much effort into what she was doing. Her father cared about each pair of shoes he made and put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into his work. Amelia insisted that she was paid the same regardless if she made 1 corset or 1,000. If she didn't benefit immediately from something, she chose not to do it. And I can't say I blame her with everything she had went through. She was the same until 1859 when she got the news that her father had passed away. So she went back home the same day she got the news, left her work behind, and didn't tell her aunt anything. She just up and left. She was hoping that she was going to get an inheritance and finally be able to make a name for herself and find her own place. She did so much for her father in her life, took care of his wife, his home, his finances, and his other children. Amelia felt that her dad owed her a lot. And when the will was finally read, it would apparently pay off. Her oldest brother, Thomas, got the business, naturally. He was training since he was a child. All of her brothers were married at this point in time, so the brothers all stayed close, leaving Amelia to fend for herself. The family home also went to Thomas. It was then that she found out that all the money her dad had left was tied up in the home or the workplace. So Amelia demanded her portion of the house outright. She didn't want the house, and she could care less what they did with it. She just wanted her portion of the money. Her 3 brothers were close and confused. Money didn't even enter their minds when their father passed. Their businesses they each were keeping were making them busy and making them money already. So they all turned on her at the funeral. They began asking her how dare she come there on the day of her father's funeral asking for money when she abandoned the family her day her mother died. She knew she lost this battle, so she packed up and went back home to her aunt. So remember, her aunt had no idea where she was for the past few days, so she carried on like normal for a bit. That is, until Thomas got himself involved. He wrote a letter to her aunt explaining the whole situation. Amelia's aunt, who was her landlord for the last 11 years, told her to pack her shit and get out as soon as possible.
Just because she was asking for money?
Yeah, and that she kind of just left, and then the day of the funeral, she's like, well, where's my money, and stuff like that. And, and the aunt didn't really know everything about the past, but she just thought, oh, wow, that was really rude of you. And
yeah.
So Amelia was now on her own, so she bounced from place to place.
I don't think she should have been kicked out, though, because of it.
No, I don't think so either.
That makes no sense.
So Amelia was on her own. She bounced from place to place. She was unable to trust anyone, and no one trusted her in return. Life continued to just keep getting worse and worse and worse. She did, however, have one family member who was on her side, even if she didn't realize it at the time. James was her middle brother. He was the one who helped the most with the household along with Amelia. He was really the only one that had ever spent any time with Amelia. The other 2 viewed her more as a maid than a sister. Thomas remembered her as his sweet little sister. He thought of her still as a person, which was unfortunately a crazy thing to think at the time. He was able to acknowledge that her asking for money when their dad died wasn't something as crazy as the other 2 thought. He was able to realize and see that Amelia had given up her entire life for that family.
Yeah, she did do a lot for them.
When Amelia was at rock bottom, she never even thought to reach out to James. She always viewed him and William, and William's the younger brother,
right,
just as extensions of Thomas. Due to her having an unstable housing situation, he was unable to write her letters or even check in on her or offer any help. After a year, he would finally get one of the many letters she was writing to the family. He wrote her back. But, unfortunately, it got to the lodging house she was at way too late. She was already gone. However, it did make its way to her due to some mutual friends they had.
Oh, that's good.
So the 2 of them would write back and forth until 1861, when Amelia asked him to send some of the family fortune so she could survive. James told her he was not able to get the money as it was tied up in the home in the business.
Right.
So, unfortunately, the only way the money could be liquidated and shared was if the other 2 brothers agreed to this. And, of course,
there's no way
neither one would.
No way that's going to fly.
They both declined immediately. They had no interest in helping their sister. Amelia did finally realize that James was not lying, and he wasn't trying to trick her. He was doing everything he could do to help her, and he would occasionally send her money from his own business, without the other
that's
two
nice
brothers
of
knowing.
him.
Yeah. So the other two brothers had no idea. So, like you said, there was not much more he could do unless he got one more brother on his side, which we all know wasn't going to be Thomas.
Right.
So, James reached out to the youngest, William, and explained the situation to him. This didn't go well at all. James let it slip that he was sending Amelia money, which caused William to go into a rage.
Uh-oh.
James's wife wasn't even aware he was sending money to Amelia.
That's not right. You should always run it by your wife.
Yeah. Here we go, folks.
Uh-oh.
So, she was so into William's anger and fit, she didn't even stop to think, why would her husband help his one and only sister? She was so fixated on being, in the madness.
Right.
So, James manned his ground. He explained their sister needed their help. She gave up her entire childhood to take care of their mother and the household. And everything they had was more than likely not something they would have ever had if it had not been for her.
Right.
So, this did not work well in his favor at all. The two brothers turned on him. They felt like they were victims. They felt Amelia was insulting them for becoming exactly who their father wanted them to become. They grew up, worked hard, and moved past their troubled childhoods. It was Amelia who kept clinging on to the past and not being able to move on. They moved on. They had money. They had families. She was sitting in self-pity, blaming everyone else for her problems. They were not the problem here, they thought. So, James still stood by Amelia's side, despite being two against him. He didn't want to abandon his only sister. They decided to give Amelia an ultimatum, 2 choices. She was more than welcome to return back to the Pile Marsh. The family home was still there. Thomas said, it's okay if you move in with my family. However, if she did not want to be a part of the family anymore, they would gather up what they could and send it to her on the condition that she would never talk to any of them ever again. So this would either prove James or William correct. If James was right, and Amelia wanted to be a part of the family again, she was welcome to join, and they would take care of her and act as if nothing happened. Or, if she took the money and ran, William would be right. It would prove that all she wanted was the money, and whatever she could do to get it would be the small price in the end. So who was right? William.
I had a feeling.
She took the money. She agreed to never speak to any of them again. On the rare occasion she'd see her aunt back in Bristol, she acted as if the old lady was not there. If that was the price she had to pay to get what she felt she deserved, she was all in. So, this brings us to 1861. Amelia's 24 years old. She thought she had enough financial stability. She thought she didn't need a man to get her a home. You got it, girl.
Does she have it, though?
Well, she's an independent woman, and she doesn't need a man. She got herself a permanent place on Trinity Street in Bristol. It was very uncommon to be 24 and not married. So a lot of people kept their distance and wondered what on earth was wrong with her.
Right.
So, Amelia kept to herself. She was content with her life of being alone. But, eventually, love came to her when she didn't expect it, as it often does. There was a boarding house that allowed both unmarried males and females to live in. They were not allowed to share rooms or even step foot in the other gender's room, though. But they often crossed paths in communal areas. She often avoided men, can't blame her. But she couldn't escape George Thomas.
So this is a boarding house?
Yeah, it's it's kind of like an apartment thing. You each have your own room, but they let men
so that's
and
where
women.
she lives then.
Yeah.
So that's where her own place was in this boarding house?
Yep.
Okay.
So, Amelia's 24, George is 59. He was old enough to be her
not
father.
Good. Not good. Run.
He lived a long and lonely life himself. He had assumed at this stage in his life it was way too late for him to find love. However, they hit it off immediately. They shared newspaper at the table and talked and got to know each other. They started meeting up on their lunch breaks and would go out for dinners. Their age gap actually worked to their benefit. No one really saw them together, and the people that did assumed nothing romantically was happening because, due to their age, they probably thought she was, his daughter.
Right.
So, a few weeks later of knowing each other, they went to a church and asked to be married. They both lied about their age on their marriage certificate.
Why did they both?
I'm guessing probably because he was kind of embarrassed of his age, maybe. Because he made himself younger on the certificate. So
And
Amelia
she made herself older.
older, yeah.
Okay.
So Amelia said she was 30 instead of 24, and George said he was 48 instead of 59. So still a huge gap, but not as drastic as the real one.
Right.
George was not a rich man by any means, but he kept them afloat by pooling their money together so they were able to live a better life than the one that either one of them could afford solo. They were able to rent a room for married couples instead of 2 single rooms, so they ended up saving a little bit of money.
That's nice.
So, and plus 2, since Amelia was one of the only women that could read and write, and now that she had a little bit of money, thanks to George, she was able to think about going into the medical field. So, ironically, she would already had a background in Latin, Greek, and basic science, thanks to the books she read as a child. So she was not able to become a doctor, because women doctors were not a thing at this time, but she was able to study to become a nurse. So, thanks to her forced in-home training with her mother, she excelled at nursing. Many people commented on how maternal she was and kind. Even though she was excelling at this job, something about the job still wasn't going quite right for Amelia. She was not good at any sort of self-reflection. That is because half of her life she was miserable, and she was only alive, it seemed, to take care of everyone else. So, one might have thought that since she was forced to be her mother's caretaker her entire life, she wouldn't want to pursue nursing to take care of other people again. However, Amelia was not able to form this mental connection. She'd never even thought of that. So, while she struggled with her work, there was always one thing she was sure of: her love for George. So, during her nursing job, she crossed paths with Ellen Dane. Ellen Dane was very impressed with Amelia's nursing capabilities. Ellen was operating a side business that went hand in hand with their nursing duties. Life was very hard for unwed, single mothers in the Victorian ages. It still is now, being a single mother, but it was way worse back then. Laws were passed back then that made it so the fathers had no financial obligation to help these children or single mothers, so there was no child support.
That's terrible. Because if it was always the men working, and
right.
women couldn't work, how were they to take care of their kids?
Right, exactly.
So did the husband get him then, or you know what I mean?
So the father basically would just be like, "You take care of the kid, I'm out," because they weren't married, so he was able to just walk away and nothing came from it. So the mother was forced to struggle. Yeah. So, it was hard for them to find jobs to support their children, as single mothers were entirely shunned back then. So there were homes that were made into maternity wards. These wards were there for women to go to and hide their pregnancies until they were able to deliver. Some of these homes were tied to legitimate churches and adoption agencies, so they would take the money the mothers would pay them to find homes for their babies. This was how baby farming started. So Ellen Dane had taken this business model where she first started off as a midwife and then started her own baby farm to help these mothers. In these farms, believe it or not, the goal was not for adoption. This is such a lengthy process to find the right home for these babies. These people were money hungry and only cared about the money. They would let these newborns slowly starve to death, since this is how now they would cut their costs, and they could replace the baby with a new paying customer. Crazy enough, Queen Victoria and her family's personal doctor, Dr. Greenhow, got wind of the baby farms and actually are credited towards putting an end to them.
Oh, that's good.
So that's kind of cool. So, Godfrey's Cordial, also known as a mother's friend, was an over-the-counter medication that was sold to young mothers. It was to cure colic and poor sleep. Many of the ingredients are harmless, but the active ingredients in the syrup were opiates. Greenhow discovered they weren't using this medicine because of the ease of it. They were using it because a well-known side effect of the opiate was appetite loss. Sorry. The babies could pass away without making a peep, and this didn't raise any suspicion either. When the bodies were examined, it was just presumed they died of malnutrition, not acts of deliberate starvation. It was a rare thing that the mothers would give birth to these babies to come back and check on them. They gave them away not because they didn't want them or couldn't afford them. They were under the impression that they were adopted out to another loving family. On the opposite hand,
right.
Yeah, right. So they were lied to from the beginning. On the opposite hand, the farmers insisted that the babies never met their biological mothers, as this would confuse them very early on. They convinced the young mothers who wanted to come back it was better that they didn't. It was better for them to make a clean, dry cut for the baby's future. When police did get involved, which was rare, they would find nothing. These farmers were smart. They were ready to pack up and move at a moment's notice, leaving next to nothing behind. Often they would find broken cots, tattered or stained blankets, but no bodies. The crazy thing is, if you really think about it, they were doing what society truly wanted at the time. Society didn't want these children. Society didn't want unwed single mothers who were not with the father. Since they were constantly running from police, this didn't give Amelia or Ellen much time together, but in this short time, Amelia learned what she needed to do. She began pondering this while she was still working as a nurse. Her working days were cut when she found out she was pregnant herself.
Uh-oh. I don't like this.
Yeah. Apparently, Ellen made quite the impression on her because she named her baby girl Ellen. This was the happiest time of Amelia's life. She was married, had a baby girl, and now a home. However, this is when George Thomas became gravely ill. Amelia once again had to be a caretaker and help out her dying husband. George was not able to work when he became sick, so their money slowly dwindled away. George died in 1869. Amelia was now as broke as ever, and she still had her young daughter to take care of. She was in desperate need of an income. In Amelia's eyes, Ellen's get-rich-quick scheme seemed to be the only option she had. Amelia had to be able to take care of her daughter and now show her daughter love while killing innocent babies who were not far off in age from her own. Amelia was a witness to so many horrors in life, it is unknown if she really realized the damage on what she was doing. She became advertising her services as a trained nurse and kept assuring people she was a married woman and a mother herself. She was advertising that she was ready to help any family with an unwanted baby. She prepared herself to be able to take care of her daughter while rotting babies were in another room of the same house. Her career as a baby farmer came naturally and quite easily to her. People were naive and willing to eat pretty much everything fed to them. If it sounded good, why wouldn't it be? There were people who had absolutely nothing to their name that were paying as low as £5 sterling, which is $6.25 US dollars today.
That seems kind of good back then. I don't know.
You got to remember too, this was even before the Depression and stuff, so money was, I don't know, that was a lot to them. $5 is a lot.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like a lot even now.
Yeah.
Because that was many years ago.
So, if the families were a bit more well off, she knew she could charge £80 sterling, which is around $100. Her current clients were barely keeping ends meet. She had a roof over her head, sure, and food on the table, but she was nowhere near coming out of poverty. She reminisced on her time with George and how simple life was when her husband was able to provide for her. She knew that she had to marry again, but not for love. She wanted to marry for the financial benefit. And so she came across as more genuine to new clients, saying that she was married. She had been alone for 3 years after George passed away, and each day was a struggle for her. So in 1872, she found William Dyer. He was a functional alcoholic who struggled to hold down work or relationships. He went from job to job until he finally settled in Bristol. He worked at a brewery. He was able to be around booze without being able to consume it. Her relationship with William was nothing like hers with George. They were often in arguments and had major personality differences. William was excited to hear that Amelia was a business owner, if that's what you want to call it. He thought this meant he'd have extra drinking money. Amelia was adamant. I know, total loser. Amelia was adamant that she wasn't sharing a dime of her money with him. She expected his money to go into the household and help take care of Ellen. There was not much equality in her relationship, and it became quite clear that Amelia wore the pants and ran a tight ship. However, their relationship couldn't have been that bad, especially since that bad physically between the two of them, because they had 2 more kids together. A daughter named Mary Ann, who went by Polly, and a son named William Samuel, after her brother and her dad. Which I don't know why she picked William and not James, but I don't know.
Yeah, interesting. Now, does she ever hurt her kids?
No.
Okay, that's good.
No, yeah, she does not do a single thing to any of her kids, all 3 of them. So, they continued to bicker and fight until Amelia got the idea to just give this guy the boot and pretend that her husband was always busy with work. Obviously, that was easier than trying to make William be the model husband while he was drunk all the time.
Right.
She didn't want him ruining her business. Divorce also wasn't really a thing back then. It was extremely frowned upon. Eventually, his abuse and his laziness got to Amelia. It was easier for her to play a widowed mother of 3 from the same father rather than spend another day with William. And it was at this point in her baby farming career that she decided to, quote, forego the inconvenience and expenses of actually caring for the children that had been placed under her watch, end quote. There was already a ton of accidental deaths and no shortage on the opium. Amelia did try to keep the babies alive at first. It was now that her goals changed. She wanted to kill the children as quickly as possible. It was during this time that the police got wind of her and her baby farms. Amelia would take long breaks from being a foster mother and would go back to nursing to get the authorities off her tail. The place she had the most success in was, oddly enough, the mental ward. She was able to talk down pretty much any mentally unstable patient due to her experience with her mother. When these words didn't work, she was able to resort to physical violence. She used these two extremes to her benefit. She was able to continue this back and forth nurse and foster work until 1879 when serious suspicion surrounded her. There was a doctor who was suspicious by the number of children's deaths that he was called on to check on from Amelia's property. He filed a police report and told him that he thinks that they should go investigate her house. So the cops did. They investigated, and what did they find?
Nothing.
I
knew it.
Yep. They found cots and opiates, but they're like, oh, okay, this is normal. What did they not find? Any dead babies. They did, however, find live babies, and they appeared to be in good health. The history of this place and the amount of death certificates from children in her care should have been enough to shut the shit show down. But was it pursued by the courts? Of course not. That would have been great. The story would have ended here. She could have been convicted of murder or manslaughter at this point in time, yet was not. The judge only got her with 6 months for neglect and made her just do physical labor for this time behind bars.
That's bull.
So the author actually points out that this was a time where you could get years in prison for stealing a loaf of bread for your starving family. Yet she got a mere slap.
6 months.
Yep, she got a mere slap on the wrist. So
what a joke.
Much like many other people we've covered in this podcast. So honestly, not crazy surprising. More disappointed. I'm not mad. I'm disappointed.
Yeah, same.
Worse words have never been said. Anyway, so yes, she's got a 6 months charge. Doesn't seem like much here. However, it did take a huge toll on Amelia. She apparently had a huge nervous breakdown due to the sentence. She never fully recovered from this, but she was still deemed mentally stable, so remember that.
That's interesting.
Yep, and it's going to come back into play several times.
Okay.
So, once she was released from prison, she wanted to focus on a legit job in nursing. Joy, here we go again. Full circle. She was back to caring for patients in mental wards, but this time, she felt like she had more in common with the patients than she did with her own coworkers.
That's saying something, you would think?
Yeah. She was facing major suicidal thoughts, depression, and paranoia. Her financial situation was not well, again. So at this point, her children were old enough and kind of on their own. None of them were rich enough to send her money to help her, but her children did love her and did what they could. So she was faced with the decision, does she go back to poverty and not know where her next meal comes from? Or does she start up the baby farming again? Which option do you think she's taking here?
Definitely the baby farm.
If you guessed baby farming, which you did, you're correct. Her time in jail was a great reflection point for her. She was able to figure out where she went wrong last time, having the doctor sign off on their death certificates. This is what led to the conviction. She decided she would take care of the bodies herself. The babies would no longer receive a Christian funeral at the Potter's Field. If you're sitting here listening, wondering why take this route, I'm with you. Allow me to explain her thought process here. Amelia did understand the risks she was going to be facing. She knew disposing the bodies brought a higher risk of her getting caught. She knew if someone found the bodies, her chances of getting caught went skyrocketing up. She knew that she could be seen transporting remains or destroying remains. She is not a rational person at this point in time. She is controlled by her fear of poverty more than her conscience as to what was right or wrong at this point.
Right, and it shows.
Yeah. This was a huge problem for her, more than the farming even. She caught the attention of the mental health doctors. So, over the next few years, her clients were drying up faster and faster. She began to self-medicating with booze and opiates. The more she did this, the more likely she'd slip up and get caught. Each time she got caught wind of any sort of police involvement or investigations, she began to substance abuse more and more and more. The police showed up to visit her townhouse to investigate a suspicious claim. They found the place completely abandoned and that the tenant was committed to Bedlam House, which is a mental facility.
Okay.
This actually worked in her favor and provided great benefit to her. She was able to lay low, and she got some sort of stability here. She knew what she needed to do and say to get a clean discharge from the facility due to her past experiences with her work in the mental ward and with her mother. So, when she got out, she felt she was perfect to become a governess. So I looked this up because I had no idea what that meant.
I don't either.
It's a single woman with an education who lives with a rich family to help take care of the older children.
Okay.
So basically doing schooling for the older children, teach them how to, get out in the real world. So she wasn't like a nanny and taking care of the baby. It's just the older kids.
I don't think this is a good idea, but okay.
So yeah, so she thought, I'm perfect for this job. So also to note, the governesses, they were not viewed as servants, but they also weren't viewed as part of the family either.
Okay.
So she was unable to find work in this field due to having no experience, so she was able to take on a job as a child minder, which is for women who were already governesses so they could focus on the older children. So her job as a child minder meant she was back in charge of watching over the infants and babies for the rich families.
Oh no.
So she went back to her old ways using laudanum opiate. It was a painkiller and a nerve tonic.
For the rich families?
No, on herself.
Oh, okay.
So she was abusing this daily. So in 1890, a woman hired Amelia. She came to Amelia because she found out she was pregnant from a little rendezvous with the master of the house, which is a huge no-no. So this was the one that was helping the older children. She got pregnant by, the dad of the house. So he cheated on his wife with the teacher.
Uh-oh.
So this was a huge no-no. Rendezvous happened. She knew she had to get rid of the kid because she didn't want to lose her job or her reputation. Right. She needed the baby to vanish. Amelia was over the moon with this news.
This was the first chapter, right? That I read.
No.
This isn't it.
This is not it. No.
Okay.
So, this meant that this was someone finally willing to pay a little bit more to have their problem taken care of. However...
That's a big payday for her.
However, she didn't think this one through. She didn't take into account that she would be seeing this woman more and more and more because she worked with her.
Ooh.
So, the governess may have wanted the baby gone from society's eyes, but not from existence. She wanted to still take care of her son. She eventually wanted to get him back. If she wanted her son gone, she wouldn't have gave him to someone she saw often.
I have a feeling this is going to come back to bite her in the ass.
It's going to bite her in the ass.
I have a bad feeling.
So,
but maybe good.
Unfortunately, no. Not to burst your bubble.
Oh,
It sounds like it's going to be good, but it's not, because she gets away with it again.
Damn it.
After a few weeks, the governess wanted to see her son again, naturally.
Right.
The one that Amelia brought in looked nothing like her son. She knew this right away. It was her word versus Amelia's. Amelia didn't give the baby a second glance. She ended up missing the original baby's birthmark on his hip. So when the governess stripped this mystery baby down and noticed no birthmark on his hip, she knew she was right. This wasn't her son. This was some random baby. So naturally she freaked out.
Could you imagine? Oh.
Naturally she freaked out. She called the police. The police arrived to question Amelia. What do you think happens?
Nothing.
Cue the waterworks. Amelia was not the same master manipulator that the last cop saw, right? This Amelia was very distraught, shaking and crying over this accusation. How dare someone accuse her of doing this?
Oh, Jesus, fuck.
She was a very, very convincing liar, that's for damn sure. And so, as the questioning continued, her mental state vanished. She then drank 2 bottles of the opiate and tried to kill herself in front of the officers.
Too bad she didn't succeed. Because I have a feeling a lot more lives are going to be dangerous.
Yep. She was rushed off to the hospitals. The doctors did everything. But this medicine was meant to be taken by the drop back then, and she downed 2 whole bottles. They were convinced she was going to die. Did she? Drum roll.
Of course fucking not.
No.
Oh my god.
So now that she survived her suicide attempt, this missing baby incident was all forgotten about. She sought out treatment and then was discharged from another mental ward. There are some that believe Amelia knew about her resistance to opium and made this whole thing up to get herself out of trouble, which obviously that seems more likely. But it is more than likely that since not much information was known about this opium addiction, that this was a legit suicide attempt to get herself out of prison time.
Maybe she watered it down.
Right. So basically, some believe she knew she'd end up surviving, but it's highly unlikely she knew she was going to survive.
Right.
I don't think she really cared at that point.
I don't think so either. She was caught and she was scared.
So, Now that she had this little fiasco and brought attention onto herself, she couldn't go back to child minding nor nursing, so yep, you guessed it. Her only option was apparently to go back to child farming. Yay, joy, awesome. But now she had a new strategy. She got rid of the whole facade about actually trying to care about the baby. She waited for the parents to stop coming around and asking, and she'd kill them immediately.
So once they were quiet for a bit, then she'd kill them?
Yep.
Because she was scared to get caught again.
Yeah, she was scared to get caught.
Because of that.
So this is where it starts to get a little worse. So
Okay.
starvation would take too long, so she moved on to strangulation. She would take string, ribbon, anything she could find, tie it onto the baby's neck, and slowly tighten it, knot by knot, until the baby died. It is crazy to think that she had real intentions when she first started baby farming, but now to think she's moved on to this, just sick and crazy.
Right, and they said, like, when she first went into nursing, they were like, she was really good at it.
And they said she was maternal.
Yeah.
And it's just, what a crock of shit.
Like, what the fuck happened?
So, change became the new thing for Amelia. Her and her kids moved from town to town, changing their names to avoid any recognition from police. Her aliases started blending together, so the stories were interchangeable. This made things way less complicated for Amelia at the time, because even if she did fake some of her mental health issues, her mental state of mind was breaking down due to her use of drugs and alcohol. Her children eventually got so confused and had no idea what to call her anymore because of all the different names she was going by. They were instructed just to refer to her as Mother. Their partners needed to call her Mother, and the clients she met with, she introduced herself as Mother, so she wouldn't get the stories confused. And then so her clients would eventually just start calling her Mother too. Which is kind of creepy if you think about it.
It's weird. I was like, yeah. That doesn't make sense.
So any time that her aliases were becoming too known, or something wasn't quite adding up, she'd have yet another public breakdown and go to another mental hospital. She would do whatever she needed to do to stay a bit, enjoyed her time, and then she would get out and move on. This would keep continuing for years. That is, until 1893, when Amelia went to the Somerset and Bath Paupers Lunatic Asylum near Wells. This hospital was completely different than where she's ever been before. This wasn't comfortable. This wasn't nice. This place was very crammed and disgusting. The rooms were so packed to the point that people couldn't even lay down on the ground because there was too many people in there. Treatment there was minor torture in hopes that they would get them out of their mental illness this way. Treatment included hydrotherapy with chilled water, long periods of hanging upside down to increase blood flow to the brain, and whatever the doctors wanted to do. Amelia faced a lot of torture and abuse at this facility, and faking her way out was next to impossible. The staff didn't care if she was cured or not. It seemed they had no intentions of helping their patients, just abusing and torturing for their own gain. These people's torture with no purpose made no sense to Amelia at the time. When she hurt people, she at least had a meaning behind it. She was getting rid of her own pain by hurting someone else.
Right.
The stress of this mental place caused her breakdowns to get worse and worse, and each one she had caused her to have further punishment. She was a bit large before she went into the facility, and when she got out of it, it took her 2 years to recover and gain that weight back. That's how much weight she lost.
Oh, wow.
She still had scars
And
from
she
her
was there
time
for
in.
2 years?
Yeah.
It's a very long time.
And she still had scars from her time in, and she had PTSD from this place. So she would freak out with any loud noise. She would shake and tremor. This place changed her for the worse.
She was already bad enough?
Yeah.
To
this
begin
place
with.
fucked her up.
Great.
None of her legit mental health was addressed here. She never talked about her stay here after her release. All the information that I just told you was gathered from third parties. She never once spoke about her time there, ever.
Must have been pretty traumatic.
After her final time in jail, Amelia took time to chill out for a bit. Her kids were old enough to take care of themselves and had their own lives going on. They could no longer be used as props to get couples or single mothers to give them their newborn children. She did go back to working for a bit, but she was not able to go back to the usual business. She used this opportunity to find a younger woman to serve as her daughter when trying to come off as a happy family. Her name was Jane Smith, otherwise known as Granny Smith to her friends, and she was the same age as Amelia's daughter Polly. Jane had no one in her life, so this love that Amelia was showing her was better than nothing. In 1895, Amelia and Jane went off on their journey to Caversham, Berkshire, for a fresh start to start a new baby farm. Polly and her husband Arthur also came along with this journey. They were having a harder time getting money together to buy a new home. Polly and Arthur were using this journey to create a new life for themselves and truly start over, much different than Amelia and Jane's plans. This new plan with Jane went swimmingly. She had more clients than she ever did before. This rapid change in growth of money for Amelia was getting a lot of public attention, and thus, this meant the coppers would soon catch on too. This meant Amelia and Jane needed to leave fast. But Polly and Arthur were finally happy. They both found jobs and weren't reliant on Amelia, so they ended up staying back. So this is where Amelia and Polly would finally part ways. It is believed that if it was anyone else, Amelia would have felt betrayed. That this proved that everyone was always out for themselves. But Amelia didn't blame Polly for wanting to stay behind and have a normal life. She had to see and deal with a lot growing up with Amelia as a mother. Polly was always there for her mother and loved her no matter what she did. Amelia recognized this and even gave her and Arthur her blessing to stay behind and promised to stay in touch. So, Amelia and Granny Smith, Jane, ended up in a tiny town called Reading. It was big enough that it fit her needs and services, but small enough that none of the other baby farms had made it this far yet. So the cops had no experience with this kind of situation. She knew that she had to take on a smaller caseload here to not get too much attention. She started writing to newspapers with her ad that they were a married couple with no family, would love to adopt a healthy child, nice country home, terms £10 sterling. That was her ad. She would also ask for toys and clothing, which she would later pawn off and make even more money. There was a lot of people interested, but the one that sparked Amelia's interest was Evelina Marmon. So that's the girl from the first chapter.
Okay.
Evelina was a barmaid who worked in Cheltenham. She was very pretty and popular, and she was only 25 years old. She fell pregnant with a child and was not married to the father. The father was just a guy who came into the bar in passing, and they ended up having a one-night stand. So she gave birth to her daughter in 1896 in the boarding house, and she named her Doris. She was looking left and right for adoption places and even put out her own ad looking for adoption. It was a weird coincidence that she picked up the paper to see how her ad looked, and it came across Amelia's ad.
Oh.
So Evelina's intent was to do a temporary adoption and to get Doris back when she was on her feet, had her own place, and had more money to take care of her properly. She wanted enough money to move to a place where she could say that she was not a widow and not just a woman who got pregnant from a one-night stand. Doris had Evelina's heart. She fell in love with her instantly. She even had second guesses about giving her up temporarily, but she did this because of other people's encouragement. If Doris did stay, it seemed that they would have to live a life of poverty and would have ended up homeless because no place would hire Evelina due to her having a baby out of wedlock.
Right.
So, Evelina responded to Amelia's ad, who was going by Mrs. Harding at the time. The letter that Jane and Amelia sent out was a basic letter that had a bunch of nonsense in it and lies that were supposed to comfort the mother parting with her baby for the first time. But we all know it was a fraud and a lie. And then she said, when she first met her, she said, "We are plain, homely people in fairly good circumstances. I should be glad to have a dear baby girl I could bring up and call my own. I don't want the child for money's sake, but for company and home comfort. I and my husband are dearly fond of children, though we could never have children of our own."
Why is she lying?
She was lying to... I think she wanted Evelina to trust her and to think she was just this old lady that never had kids and wanted kids so bad. I think she was trying to do a pity party.
That's just crazy, because up until now, she wasn't.
Yeah, right. So then she signed it. "With me, a child would have a good home and a motherly life." Which we all know is not true.
Right.
So Evelina...
Unfortunately,
correct. Evelina was willing to pay this £10 sterling, and she got a box of clothes for Doris together. She had a different arrangement in mind, however. She wanted to pay a more affordable weekly fee for the care of Doris until she was able to take her back. She was always very upfront that she wanted Doris back. So, this would end up getting Amelia way more than £10 in the long run, assuming she took a few months to get her back. However, Amelia insisted on the full £10 immediately to use it to decorate the nursery and other costs. So, Evelina drained her savings and borrowed money from multiple people to front this £10. But an arrangement was made. Amelia was to come to get Doris soon. When Amelia arrived to Evelina's house, she was quite shocked. Amelia was very old and stocky. She had deep-set wrinkles and didn't even smile when she saw Evelina peering out the door. This was not the lady she was picturing wrote that endearing letter to her. Evelina wanted to call this whole thing off. She had a horrible gut feeling. But when Amelia walked in and saw Doris, her whole face and mood changed. She smiled, her hand stretched out towards Doris. She became very warm and kind. She hugged Evelina and told her that she would take excellent care of Doris. Evelina said she was unsure about the whole thing, and Amelia gave her assurance and let her know everything was going to be fine. Evelina wanted to change those terms and get weekly updates on her baby girl and pay for those weekly. The mean side of Amelia came out once again. She told her she would write letters weekly, but she couldn't be bothered with the troubles of sending money through the mail. She wanted her time to focus on the baby, not the business part of this whole deal. Evelina handed over Doris's box of things, the 10 pounds, and began to start to give Doris over. She was very hesitant. She knew it was for the best to put her up for adoption until she got her life together, but this was really hard for her. Amelia took advantage of the scenario and asked Evelina if she wanted to walk them to the train station and carry Doris the whole time. Evelina happily agreed. When the train arrived, Evelina still was having troubles handing Doris over. Amelia bought Evelina a train ticket to Gloucester so that Evelina could spend more time with Doris. This was empathy that no one has ever seen from Amelia. But the ticket was probably cheap enough, the clothes she pawned would probably get her money back, and the price was worth it to avoid a scene or any witnesses. So, obviously, she did a good thing, but had bad...
Right. She had bad intentions.
Yeah. So, when they arrived, Evelina was sobbing and crying, but handed Doris over and promised to see her again soon. Sorry, this is really hard. It's just very sad, just picturing the whole thing.
Yeah. I wish she didn't give her up.
I do too. So Amelia told her that they were going to go back to Reading to get their life started, but this was a lie. She bought a new train ticket and headed towards London. She didn't want to do much of her business in Reading to avoid any local attention. So, Polly was nearby and conveniently provided with her another operation base. When they parted earlier, Polly became a dressmaker and Arthur was a general laborer. Polly was 23 and already more successful than Amelia had ever been. Polly had no intention of heading down the same path as Amelia, but this didn't mean that she didn't have her mother's influence or dark mind. When she saw her mother show up at the door with a baby, she quickly let them inside. Polly and Amelia had a special bond. Polly was still a part of her mother. Even if she had gotten herself out of the business and started making positive changes on her own, she didn't even second guess that she could tell her mother she wasn't allowed inside or didn't have to partake in this murder. Doris was crying at this point. She was hungry and needed a diaper change. Both were too much work for Amelia. She went into Polly's office, grabbed some edging tape, and tied a bow around Doris's neck. This band was not tight enough to kill Doris. There was still a small amount of air that could still make it through and get blood to the brain. Doris would die, but not quickly.
Polly knew all this too?
Yes. Amelia sat and watched as Doris struggled and flailed around. Polly, on the other hand, did not stay and watch. She saw this too many times. So what is she doing instead? She's in the kitchen preparing her mother tea. Amelia sat there for half an hour watching Doris struggle and struggle. The brain damage set in due to oxygen cutoff, and Amelia didn't look away once. She may have started these baby farms for just money, but now it's just for fun. She later confessed that she enjoyed watching helpless babies struggle and die, and her only complaint, it ended too quickly.
What a cunt. I do not like this Amelia character. What a bitch.
It keeps getting worse. She could have killed them faster by tying the knots tighter, but she enjoyed watching them die slowly. Polly came back after she knew the baby was dead to help her mother with the cleanup. They wrapped Doris's body with an oversized napkin and tied it off. They moved on to the box of goods from Evelina and started going through what was good and what wasn't. What they could pawn off, basically.
Exactly, yeah, to get money.
So Amelia stayed the night and greeted Arthur when he got home, and they all ate together as Doris's body was in the bag next to them. Arthur had no idea that this happened. So I want to set that clear. Arthur had no idea. So, Amelia only talked to Polly when she needed help getting rid of a body. Amelia left first thing in the morning, but not for long. She came back the same day with another baby and a pocket full of cash.
Oh my God, who was giving her all these babies?
Harry Simmons was the baby's name. He was a year and a half old, so that's why I thought it'd be kind of hard, because it's around Mason's age. But she had more time than Doris, or he had more time alive than Doris, but he was just as small. His mother was in the same situation as Evelina. Amelia began looking around for another string to kill Harry, but she couldn't find anything. So what did she do? She untied Doris's bag and untied her knot and used the same string to strangle Harry. Amelia sat there and watched with a smile, and didn't even blink to ensure she didn't miss a second of Harry struggling and screaming. Amelia would watch the bodies change colors. He'd go from white to pink to red to purple, and she even put her finger to their lips to ensure they weren't breathing anymore.
How do you get off on this?
Believe me, I wish I knew. Well, actually, I'm glad I don't know. But Polly eventually returns.
I'm glad you don't too.
And they tied both bodies up in the same bag. She also found a few bricks in the alleyway. They tied those to the bag so the bag would sink in the water. Amelia would leave that night, took the first bus, and then the train back to Reading with her new bag. She didn't go home when she got back to Reading. Instead, she cut through town to the river. The river was called Thames. She got up to the railing and tried to shove the bag through. The bag was too big to fit through. She kept trying and trying and trying. Eventually, the bag would fall through, and she heard the splash. However, when she turned around and noticed a man walking, she was wondering how much of that he saw. She was so paranoid that she said nothing when the guy smiled and said good evening. Amelia rushed home thinking about what to do about the potential witness the whole way back home. She was too old to turn herself in. She was too old to throw herself at him to attack him.
Right.
Polly was married and in London. She couldn't help. Amelia didn't know this guy's name, but remembered his face. She managed to calm herself down by convincing her that he saw nothing. And even if he did, she would say it was old garbage she was getting rid of. She figured she'd leave this guy alone, and if she brought it up to him again, the memory would just keep resurfacing for him.
Right.
Doris and Harry were not the only babies that Amelia had thrown in the Thames. But she was always very careful when it came to the disposal. That is, until Helena Fry was 15 months old when she came into Amelia's care at the Temple Meads train station. When Amelia was on her return home, the baby was gone. All she had was a parcel that was wrapped in brown paper. She hid this parcel in a cupboard in her house out of sight. However, then a horrendous smell of decay began to happen at her house. She went on pretending everything was fine until her whole house smelled of decay and rot. She had Helena's dead body in her cupboard for 3 weeks, and she finally needed to get rid of it. She normally would have added weights to the package to make sure that it sank, but because the smell was so bad, she didn't even want to open the package to add the rocks to it. She assumed by now the baby was nothing but bones, and those would just sink, right? So, she did not try to force it through the railing. Instead, she just threw the package over the railing. She was 56 at this time and still had good strength. When Amelia got home, she opened every single door and window to air the house out while she sat outside.
What if someone smells it?
However, Helena's body did not sink. This parcel contained gases from decay that had almost instantly floated. On March 30th, the parcel made its way downtown. There was a guy on a boat who saw this thinking it fell off another boat, so he retrieved it with his fishing hook. After he got this package on deck, he noticed the horrible smell. He thought about throwing it back overboard, thinking it was rotten sewage, garbage, or bait.
Please tell me he didn't.
No, he used a handkerchief he held a handkerchief to his nose and cut open the package.
Oh, thank God he opened it.
And he saw something he'd never forget. So he called the Reading police immediately. There were only 3 detectives on the whole force at this time, and of course none of them knew how to handle something like this. The body was so decomposed at this point it was hard to tell if it was even human. This did not stop Chief Constable Tousley and Detective Constable Anderson. They noticed the white tape around the neck and ruled that as the cause of death. There were no other signs of abuse to the body. This was not typical for them to see. There were no signs of the baby being shaken or hurt up until the point that it passed away. Forensics was very new at this point, so they were not able to tell how long her body was in the water. They figured this body could have been dumped from anywhere that was along the river, making it next to impossible to figure out where to start. Depending on where the body was dumped, they could be looking at different days and times that the body was dropped. This goes to show that even if Amelia was messy with the disposal, she did have a foolproof plan. It was hard to determine when and where the crimes were happening. Now, you'd think that since much information was available that the investigation would have ended here. Not so fast. Anderson didn't want to close his case. He didn't want the baby to have an unmarked grave. He knew the body wasn't going to give him enough information, so he moved on to the wrapping that the body was in. He let the paper completely dry out, but not surprisingly, this paper was used by almost every business all over the country.
Oh, damn it.
However, in one of the folds of the paper, he found a label. This label was attached to the package but got loose in the water, and it managed to float its way up with the package by pure luck.
Oh, thank God for that.
Yeah. This label was from Temple Mead Station in Bristol. Bristol was several miles up north. There were trains that went that far, but the most logical conclusion was that for the body to end up in Reading where it was that it had to have been disposed of in Reading after it got off the train. So they started checking times at the station to see when trains from Bristol arrived. However, remember that Amelia held onto the body for 3 weeks. So the body was still in one piece but began decaying. So the police thought that since the baby must have died shortly before it was in the water, they didn't even think that the person would have held onto the body for this long.
Oh, shit. So
So-
she got away.
Yes. So
I hate when this happens.
So then when they started looking into the tickets, Amelia fell through the cracks because she came at the beginning of the month. Once again, this puts a damper on the investigation, but Anderson was still not ready to give up. He went over this wrapping inch by inch using microscopes. However, it's thanks to him and his work, he was able to find something. There was ink on the package. It had washed away in the water, but there was still an indentation from where something was written. So he was able to carefully trace this over and found Mrs. Thomas, 26 Piggott's Road, Caversham. They finally had a name and address tied to the murder. Police immediately fled to the scene to question who lived there. However, they found no one there by the name of Thomas. They also found that the people who lived there prior to this new person also didn't go by that name. So then they assumed that whoever was using this fake name was long gone and no longer lived there. So they started asking around, talking with neighbors. Another name popped up, Amelia Dyer.
Uh-oh.
So the police thought nothing of this, really. The name didn't ring any bells from them. She was never really in trouble because every time she would get out of it. And she's in a whole new area. So, and that's the thing, records were not shared across the UK until almost 100 years later. So, her crimes didn't catch up to her when she moved from place to place. It would take weeks for towns to catch wind about news from other places. There's no TV, nothing, so.
Right.
So, due to people having to wait from surrounding towns to send files and info, they checked Reading town records and uncovered her address, 45 Kensington Road. There was a plan to storm in and arrest her. This was all going so well. That is, until Constable Tousley gives us the hammer. Anderson proved that he was a great detective and was able to find clues. However, he was still inexperienced when it came to understanding a criminal. He had not realized that between all the different names and addresses registered her showed that she had no problem running the second she caught wind that the police were onto her. Reading was a very small town that rumors and talk spread very quickly. Tousley knew that the rumors would reach her faster than the police could. So this led to a new plan being made. A telegram would be sent to Amelia from a new local client. This new client would write in stating that she was local and wanted to meet up with Amelia to discuss possibly fostering her newborn. They intercepted this return telegram the same day and set up a time for this meeting at Amelia's home on April 3rd. This fake meeting was to prove that she was still running illegal baby farms and to determine her actual location. So, when Amelia opened her door that morning to greet this lady the police sent in as a decoy, the police flew from everywhere and arrested Amelia under suspicion of murder. So, the search of her house began. No evidence in sight, no remains in sight. So, you'd think, bummer, they haven't found anything, she must be off the hook. Wrong. They did find something. That smell. It reeked of death and decay.
Wow. Still.
Yeah. The whole house smelled of that thanks to that one body she had decaying in there for 3 weeks. White edging tape was found by the roll there, tons of it. Granny Smith and Amelia were not involved in the dressmaking trade, so why on earth would they have that much? They also found the laudanum and other baby calming aids. They did not find anything like cots or babies, which they thought they would find in a possible baby farm. But remember, she was killing the infants almost as soon as she got them, so there was no need for a cot.
Right.
But as we know, she was no longer doing baby farming. Like I said, she was just killing them. They found basic evidence supporting their theory. They found pawn tickets for children's clothing from all over the country. They found receipts from ads she placed in local papers. They found letters from mothers requesting updates on their children, all unanswered. They also found telegrams. All of them were referencing adoption arrangements, meeting times and places, and dollar amounts for the trade. There was plenty of evidence to convict her of baby farming, but due to the lack of babies present on this opened up to the possibility of going after her for something worse. Due to their research into the paperwork, that uncovered that Mrs. Thomas had taken over 20 babies over a few months in reading. They also found some inquiries with a landlord for a larger house. Had the cops not stepped in here, it's fairly certain that she would have proceeded to move and keep the killings going.
Right.
They were not able to get a confession from Amelia about the bodies, but she also couldn't weasel her way out of the situation either. It seemed they were at a standstill for a bit. Since they didn't have this confession, all police could do was convict her with circumstantial evidence. No witnesses had stepped forward at this point. Amelia was officially reprimanded in custody on the murder charges on April 4th and would never be released again. On the days after her arrest, the police were called back to the river to search for more evidence. Over the next 4 weeks, the entire riverbed was scraped for evidence. They found another 6 bodies.
Wow.
And by the way the bodies looked, they could tell it was somewhat recently that they were disposed of. Around the throats of the 6 bodies, they found the same light edging tape. They were unable to still pull a confession from Amelia. She then decided to play the insanity route. She thought if she was able to prove that she was mentally unstable, she would get off on a plea deal or a much less sentence. She developed this religious mania. She would pray every chance she got all of a sudden. She kept saying everything she did was for him and his plan, meaning God.
Yeah, no.
Amelia never stepped foot in a church willingly in her life. The only time she went to church was when she was at the poorhouse and was forced to go as a child. They started creating a file on her backstory. They put together that every time the police were on her trail, she would often have the same mental breakdown and get put into a mental hospital and all would be forgotten. They realized she often tried to kill herself to get out of trouble. So realizing this, they immediately stormed her jail cell. They found her swinging from a noose made from a bedsheet from her upside-down bed frame. Forensics, again, wasn't really a thing, but if it was, they would have discovered that she was only hanging there for a second. She jumped from a bucket that was used as a toilet the second she heard someone coming. There would be one more suicide attempt. Once again, she was caught by the guard, so she didn't die from that.
Okay.
So,
good. She deserves to live with what she did.
They knew that this attempt was more BS than this first one. Amelia knew the guard's schedules. She purposely planned her attempt for when a guard would be coming in to check on her, almost 100% guaranteeing her safety.
How was she clinically, I don't know how she was deemed as sane. She sounds insane to me.
I think a lot of what people know is what's sane versus now versus then is it's way different.
No, that's true. I gotta remember, this is from, what,
this
1800s?
is, 1800s, yeah.
Long time ago. Long time ago.
So, while she stayed in jail, the police found the single woman who were in contact with Amelia. They reassured these women that they were not in trouble for what they had done, and they would not tell anyone what they did if they promised to be witnesses and provide statements. So the next task was to match the bodies to the correct parents. Evelina was able to identify Doris. Doris was the only child without a white strip of tape around her neck. Harry Simmons was also identified by his mother, despite the deformity on his face due to the decay. Helena Fry was also identified by her mother. She, however, wanted to remain anonymous and refused to speak at the trial. It was just too much for her.
Yeah.
The mothers were asked if Amelia was the woman they handed their children over to. Evelina called her Mrs. Harding, and Mrs. Fry called her Mrs. Thomas, but they both agreed she was the woman they gave their children to. They were promised a well-being for both of their children. Mind you, this whole thing happened 11 days after Evelina had given up Doris. She reached out twice for a wellness check. One was unanswered, and the other was responded to with a bland telegram that her baby was doing just fine adjusting to her new life. Amelia's neighbor in Reading came forward now and told police about seeing Amelia push that old carpet bag through the railings above the river late at night, so he finally came forward. They finally had a link to match Amelia with the bodies they found. However, they were still hoping to get a confession. They tracked the white tape back to Polly. So they figured if the tape was originally used by Polly, they figured the murders might have happened there too, with her knowing.
Okay, I'm happy they're linking her to it too.
Yeah.
Because she should have done something or said something.
So Polly and Arthur were both immediately arrested in suspicion that they were accomplices to Amelia's crimes. They both lost their jobs. Their house was ransacked by police searching for more evidence, and they were unable to hurt Amelia. But they knew that since Polly worked so hard for the life that she had after her time with Amelia, that Amelia would fold. They apparently threatened Arthur's life and made Polly break. They just waited for her to break down to Amelia. It was known that Amelia didn't care about anyone other than herself and Polly.
Clearly.
Amelia ended up making a full confession and accepted full responsibility for the bodies that were found in the water. She said that her daughter provided the tape but had no idea what she was going to do with it. She also said that Arthur was so stupid that killing him would do nothing and he had absolutely no idea what was going on. On April 16th, 1986, Amelia wrote a confession, so I'm going to read you what she wrote. Sir, will you kindly grant me the favor of presenting this to the magistrates on Saturday the 18th, the instant I have made this statement out? For I may not have the opportunity, then I must relieve my mind. I do know, and I feel my days are numbered, on this earth, but I do feel it is an awful thing drawing innocent people into trouble. I do know I shall have to answer before God Almighty and my judge in heaven on earth. Neither my daughter Mary Ann Palmer nor her husband Alfred Ernest Palmer. I do most solemnly declare neither of them had anything to do with it at all. They never knew I contemplated doing such a wicked thing until it was too late. I am speaking the truth and nothing but the truth, as I hope to be forgiven. I myself and I alone must stand before my Maker in heaven to give an answer for it all. Witness my hand, Amelia Dyer. So it is important to know there was a lot of spelling errors, almost no punctuation, making it a huge run-on sentence. It is not clear if she did this intentionally. It's also believed that she used a lot of religious words to try to sway the judge reading it. She was hoping to be viewed upon with kindness and empathy. Arthur Palmer was discharged after this letter, so they realized that he had nothing to do with it. They let him go. However, Polly remained in custody. It was possible that neither one of them was involved, but the police figured there was no way she did all this alone. Granny Smith was also being charged as an accessory, but lacked the mental capacity to really do much more. Since Amelia didn't really bat an eye at Granny Smith, they used it to her benefit. She testified against herself and Amelia for a lesser sentence. It did not take long to get a case at all. On May 22nd, Amelia made her first appearance in the Old Bailey courthouse in London. In the case of Doris Marmon, this was the only murder charge she was being charged on because they had enough proof. She pleaded guilty to premeditated murder of the baby.
So one?
Yep.
That's it?
Yep. Over the next few days, families and friends spoke out against her, spoke about where she got money, the behavior she was partaking in. Not a single person came to her defense. Evelina Mormon entered her statement about how badly Amelia hurt her and destroyed her life. Next was the witness who saw her disposing of the body in the water, and then the officer who discovered the parcel. Polly was last to the stand. Polly explained what happened and how her mother showed up, asked for the tape, and was left alone with the baby, and then left. Polly's statement being her daughter was very, very moving for the jury. It is to note that every family member or friend who testified her against her at this time was believed to have had some sort of involvement in her crime. Every single one of them was under suspicion, but it was vital that she took the full fall for all of them. It was believed that Polly wouldn't have been so open about this had Amelia not told her to do so. She didn't want her daughter to face the same fate she was looking at. Granny Smith assumed that helping the police would mean that she would inherit all of Amelia's assets and would be free to go, and that she would benefit for the first time with working with Amelia. She thought she would walk away with no consequences, but that is not the case. Some thought Amelia would fight all of this again. She was smart. However, when she took the stand, she looked at everyone and nodded. She wanted this to be all pinned on her for the last time. It is believed that she still thought there was a way out of this. She was expecting to be found not guilty due to insanity, but the police had already prepared for this. They had briefed the whole court system ahead of time about her changing personalities and tactics. They also came prepared with doctors who had assessed Amelia's mental conditions and concluded she was sane enough to know the difference between right and wrong at the time of the murders. She tried to make herself seem deranged. She talked about how she killed each one slowly and savored every moment, and how she talked about how she just tossed their bodies away like they meant nothing. She actually ended up doing the most damage to herself in the whole court case. She was told by each person in the jury how evil she truly was. It took the jury 4.5 minutes to decide her fate. They
That's
decided,
quick.
yeah, that was quick. They decided she needed to die for her crimes. She was sentenced to death by hanging, the worst punishment available at the time. They answered the questions as to why the other They answered the question as to why the other murders were not on trial. It was to not waste the court's time. They did not want to drag the families through more knowing that they already knew what had happened. Justice was finally going to be served, and there was no other reason to keep it from happening sooner. She was to die within a month. So, after her trial, she was taken to Newgate Prison. She was kept isolated from everyone else because most of them wanted to fight or kill her for killing almost 400 babies. There was a separate wing in the prison for people who were awaiting execution. During her time, she requested to have blank journals. In these journals, she documented her whole life and her crimes. Between her trial and her execution, she didn't care about herself at all. She was still worried about Polly, who was facing trial next. Amelia was subpoenaed to be a witness at Polly's trial by her attorney. The trial was not set to happen until Amelia was supposed to have already been dead at the execution. So, they figured they could delay this date to make sure she could appear in court, but realized soon after this would create more problems than it was worth. So, they came to the conclusion that legally Amelia could not be called as a witness because she was already dead. She was dead the second they sentenced her to her execution. Her 5 journal confessions was not even for the victim's family to have closure, but again, she wrote it in hopes that it could benefit Polly. On the night of June 9th, 1986, the Newgate chaplain came to her and asked if she wanted to be absolved of her sins. She told him yes, she did. She said that she would have pled not guilty and got off scot-free if she didn't want these sins lifted. He asked her if she wanted to make a confession so that she might receive his blessing, and she handed him the journals and asked if this was enough. A warden came by her cell right before midnight and let her know that the charges against Polly were dropped, and she was released. Amelia sighed a breath of fresh air. She was so relieved, knowing that her daughter was going to be okay. She finally fell asleep for the first time since she was in the cell. She was awoken at 8 a.m. the next morning. She was escorted by one guard and the assistant chaplain. At 9 a.m., she was brought up to the gallows and asked if she had any last words. She shrugged her shoulders and whispered, "I have nothing to say." A burlap sack was placed over her head and then a noose. It was tightened around her neck. She then was placed onto a trap door, and the lever was pulled, and she hung there. It was extremely silent as her neck broke instantly, and she died immediately. The townspeople cheered as a black flag went up the flagpole, announcing that an execution had just happened. Her death certificate was read out and pinned to a bulletin board so people could read it as they passed by. Finally, it comes to an end. Or so we thought. Thanks to Amelia, the adoption laws changed very quickly in England. It became very strict and had to be done through a court of law. Personal advertisements also had to be searched by the police to make sure there was no mentions of babies. They were searching for anything that resembled ads for baby farming. However, even 2 years after Amelia's execution, baby farming was still alive and still thriving. Railway workers were now instructed to examine all packages that were the size of babies. During one of these examinations, a worker at the Newton Abbot station in Devon discovered one of these packages. This soft paper wrapped package contained a 3-week-old baby. It was cold to the touch and soaking wet. The worker thought the baby was dead, but it was not.
What?
So, the baby was brought to the hospital for treatment. The baby's mother was named Jane Hill. She was a widow. She had just given up her baby the day before. She had filled out all the official paperwork and gave her to Mrs. Stewart. They were never able to find Mrs. Stewart, as this was a fake name. Everything about the description of what this woman looked like led police to know exactly who the person was.
Polly. I had a feeling it was gonna be fucking her.
There was not enough evidence to convict her, and it took a long time to track her down. So I tried looking it up. I
have the chills right now.
I couldn't find anything on what they did with her or anything like that. I searched for hours. Nothing was ever said.
I mean, it's very long ago, so that makes sense.
So.
I had a feeling this was going to happen.
I know. That was the big twist. I was like, what?
No wonder why she didn't say anything. Who knows if she was doing it the same time her mom was.
Yeah, right. And the fact
we
that
have no fucking idea.
I think Amelia knew, because that's why she wanted her to be so acquitted so bad. And then, yeah, all of a sudden that this happened. So, and the thing is, too, is they couldn't really charge her or convict her because the baby was still alive. So, obviously she didn't kill it, but still. So it is believed that Amelia killed close to 400 babies. But this might also just be an exaggeration because of how long she spent in mental wards, where she was unstable and unable to kill. She had also had to pack up and move every few weeks and work on a new identity. It is impossible to know exactly how many she killed, but it is believed to be over 100 at least confirmed. People are now speculating what mental illnesses Amelia could have had due to the trauma she faced as a child. It is believed that she might have had borderline personality disorder, which was completely unheard of back then and is still being studied today, as it is a more rare diagnosis. I was not able to find anything more on Polly. Like I said, I searched quite a while, peeps, but if anything else comes up, I will be sure to update you. So that's all I got. So what'd you think?
That's
a
crazy.
Lot. Yeah.
That was a lot.
It's an absolute just bonkers at the end. I was not expecting Polly.
That's heartbreaking.
And Arthur had no idea the whole time.
I hope baby farms aren't a thing anymore.
They're not a thing anymore, no.
They better not be.
No.
Oh.
Now it's just plain murder if it does happen, but it's not like this where it's like getting taken by the hundreds. But yeah, she was definitely evil. She took advantage of poor innocent women thinking that they're just giving their baby up for a few weeks and then we'll get them back, but it's just sick.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrible.
So I can't wait for Drew to listen to this too and get his reaction since he had to step out.
Yeah, Mason was kind of being a bit much. 15 minutes in and he left, so.
But yeah, so that's all I have now, but I'm very excited for next week to hear part 2 with Drew again.
Yeah, and I'm excited for you guys to see what we have coming your way. It's pretty exciting.
So, once again, please make sure you're following us on all social media and email us in some new cases at contactus@chiefsforthoughtpodcast.com. Other than that, I hope you guys have a good month. And yeah that's it. Cool. I guess we're going to sign off.
Yeah, you and Drew will be here next week. And then the following week, we're going to take a break to work on our little special surprise we have coming together.
Well, I hope everyone has a great Valentine's Day, too. Forgot that's coming up on Friday.
Will you be my Valentine?
You didn't even have to ask. It's already assumed. But, all right, peeps, we're going to sign off. So, thanks again. This is Ariel.
This is Maggie. Have a good night.
Bye.